Help the Crowd Shout Radio Show grow and thrive by doing something you already do. Shop on Amazon. Amazon always has great deals for whatever you are looking for. From survivalists and riot gear to beanie babies. Next time you're going to shop at Amazon, use my link. The prices stay the same, but I get credit for the sale. Just go to tinyurl.com/LouisB and just shop normally, knowing that you're helping support the Crotch Shot Radio Show. That's tinyurl.com/LouisB.
Warning.
This show contains mature content. Listener discretion is advised.
Are you ready to get your mind blown?
One angry New York City Puerto Rican decided to start a radio show, determined to piss the world off by shoving a mirror in front of society's face. He kicked them in the balls.
What are you? Who are you?
This is the Crotch Shot Radio Show. Crotch Shot Radio Show.
This is not a test. This is a broadcast transmission.
We're going to stay on the air.
And now, Louis B.
Yo, welcome to the Crowd Shot Radio Show, where we kick the issues in the balls. We are on an active war against bullshit. We would do anything and everything to expose bullshit. The ends sometimes justify the means. So if you're angry and want the truth exposed, then strap in and prepare to be shocked. This is Smash Mouth Talk. If you can't accept that, then fuck off. I'm your host, Louis B. I takes no bullshit from nobody. I actually expose the bullshit of society and chop it up into easy to digest chunks for you. Today won't be any different. Today, I'm going to be talking about, is there an information holy war going on? It seems like the left is attacking religion and Christianity. All right, Daniel.
Yeah, hey, how are you?
How you doing? Okay, so yeah, I got you on here, and we're I wanted to discuss because I see this a lot, especially with you're Jewish, so you're a rabbi.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Newly ordained, newly became a member of the New York Board of Rabbis.
Ah, well, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So, and of course, I'm going to get accused of supporting Zionism for some reason, but that's fine.
Well, we'll get to that because we're going to see how it all works together. How really the anti-Semitism that you see nowadays, how it really takes more of a very sinister kind of anti-biblical tone. We'll get
right. I mean, for not to sound cliche, but literally, my best friend is Jewish. I was a groomsman at his wedding, with the yarmulke and everything. Which, if you think about it, it's very stylish.
Yeah. Especially if you got a bald spot, it's very stylish.
Yeah, well, I don't. I thought it was fun. It was at and the wedding was Orthodox, so
yeah, which I am.
Okay. So and it was funny because the rabbi that married my best friend and his wife, I was like, wow, I really I was semi joking, semi serious, like, I really like how the skull cap looks on me. And he's like, well, if you convert, you could wear it all the time. And I'm like, I mean, I can't do that. My mom's a Jehovah's Witness and she'll kill me. And he's like, oh, I know all about Jehovah's Witnesses. You're halfway there.
Yeah, that is true to an extent.
Yeah.
that is true to an extent, because they don't believe in eternity. So
no,
theology is, the theology is kind of Jewish in that sense.
Well, we also they also have something similar to a Passover.
Mm-hmm.
So like every April, or I forgot, it would be like Nice and 13, and I don't know, like April something.
The 13th of Nisan is like a couple of days before the actual Passover.
Yeah, it's to commemorate Christ's death, and instead of like partaking of like a Seder, we pass over red wine and unleavened bread, which represents Christ's body and his blood. And unless you're one of the anointed that are promised to go to be resurrected in heaven, those are only people that are allowed to eat and drink of those emblems. Otherwise, you just pass it to the next person, and you pray over them, and you discuss what his sacrifices meant to the world, and what it meant. So that's the tradition we have. That's pretty much the only holiday I guess we would celebrate.
Right.
And it's more of a remembrance than a celebration. But anyways. But the reason why I put out a call for preachers, is because it really seems like whenever, like, I've seen videos of leftists attacking, well, specifically Christian street preachers. And I've heard stories of, especially a lot of leftists. Well, my mom doesn't consider them leftists because she's apolitical, because they're supposed to stay out of politics. But she's told me stories about how a lot of this new hipster crowd acts towards religion. Like, if you discuss the Bible or any type of religion to them, unless it's Buddhism or something like that, like a trendy religion, they act as if you are, you're committing a hate crime. And a lot of these videos, you see them, they'll just come up to the preacher and start cursing them out.
Or worse, they get violent in many cases also.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny I get you on here. Well, not funny, but a coincidence that I get you on here as well is because I remember last year during May Day, while we were counter protesting the communists over here at Union Square, they were chanting, "Israel, go to hell." And they were chanting. Yeah, they're against the Israeli state and all that, and they're saying, oh, it's an apartheid state and whatnot. I'm not too versed in that subject, so I don't have an opinion either way, but it just the whole chanting "Israel, go to hell" is kind of ironic to me, especially when people who support Trump or people who are basically on the right are constantly considered Nazis.
Oh, it's the most absurd thing out there. What we're seeing in this country is a very calculated assault on freedom of expression and freedom of speech. And along with that comes an assault on freedom of religion. All of the First Amendment rights are under direct attack by the left. All in the name of not being offended, quote unquote. They're so concerned with not being offended in their own right that they'll literally verbally and physically assault people that disagree with them. And they do target people of faith, religious people. They have incredible invective hatred for. Now, to your point about Israel, you know, a country that does have a biblical basis, of course they're going to hate, because they hate anything that has objective morality or objective truth behind it.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the hatred of religion comes from. Religion is predicated on the notion that there are certain truths in the world that are axiomatic, that there are certain things that are objectively true,
mm-hmm.
and that they're true because they stand independent of changing circumstances. And, you know, this is directly counter to what the radical left stands for, because the radical left believes that everything is relative. Their conception of the world is through a lens of subjectivity and relativism. So I think that's the first beef with religion, and then of course Marx called it the opiate of the masses. You know, so I think that element is there as well. You know, and I think that's really what we're seeing the effects of. The reaction to Trump moving the embassy to Jerusalem, I think this is coming out even more. I mean, not one Democrat was present at the opening of that embassy, despite the fact that it was Bill Clinton who signed this into law in 1995.
Mm-hmm.
Bipartisan legislation that recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel back in 95.
I don't understand what, like, especially in this country, like, why do I care? Why should I care where, you know, where an embassy is placed? Like,
I'll tell you, it shouldn't be an issue, because it should really be that, you know, for diplomatic purposes, we recognize and we honor the sovereignty of countries.
Yeah.
Right? If you're going to recognize the sovereignty of a nation, then you need to recognize their capital as their capital. Until just a few days ago, we haven't been doing that. So that's really why it shouldn't be a big deal, but yet this is the biggest news story plastered all throughout Facebook, plastered all throughout the media. You know, they're acting as if this is the worst thing that ever could have been done.
But, you know, if that's the case, I mean, like, if you really think about it, they had a problem with there being an embassy in Israel, period. They would rather there not be an embassy in Israel, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, whether you agree with how Israel does things or not, we still need to do business and have treaties with other countries.
Of course, and Israel happens to be the only free society in the Middle East. They're the only non-Islamic country in the Middle East that we're able to have a decent relationship with.
And ironically,
and there's a reason for it. They're a relatively westernized country, so of course we need to deal with them.
I mean, and ironically, you know, it's pretty much the only country in the Middle East that's not throwing gays off of roofs.
That's right. You know, there's LGBT equality in Israel, and that's a whole other thing. Pinkwashing. You know, you have the fact that these leftists, they're against Israel, but you have gay academics that are against Israel and pro-Palestinian, despite the fact that the Palestinians elected Hamas, a terror organization, as their government,
mm-hmm.
and Hamas execute gays by the dozens.
Yeah.
You know, and nobody says anything about that. You know. You know, the repression of homosexuals under Islamic rule is nothing that they want to talk about. They don't want to talk about the way women are treated under Islamic rule.
Yeah.
Instead, they would rather pick fights with Christians, mostly Christians, because they know that Christians are not going to blow themselves up in retaliation.
No.
Right. You know, we have a Broadway show called The Book of Mormon. All right. You know, I'm not an expert on the Mormon theology. Some consider it Christian, some don't. But we could say that they're like a Christian type group culturally in America, the Mormons.
Yeah.
Right? You know, we have a show on Broadway called The Book of Mormon, mocking the Mormon religion and their scriptures. And you imagine if there would have been a show on Broadway mocking the Quran. You know, they had that cartoon then in Denmark a few years ago. A guy made a cartoon mocking the Quran and Muhammad, and there was pandemonium, there was rioting, there was violence, terrorism all over.
In fact, if it was the Book of Muhammad, which I'm surprised Matt and Trey haven't pulled the trigger and done that. Yeah. But you would have non-Muslims protesting that.
That's right. You would have liberal Jews and the hipsters and every variety of leftist. and Freakazoid protesting on the streets against this.
That was my favorite cartoon growing up. Don't knock Freakazoid. But no, but you know, but the thing, and I hate. Well, I don't know why I hate sounding like this, but it really, when you watch these videos of people attacking mostly Christian ministers, it really, when they hear God's name, which, out of respect for you, I won't mention because you're not allowed to say his name, to my understanding.
Yeah, well, you know, God's name, the four-letter name of God, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, we don't really know how it's supposed to be pronounced, you know. In English, they make it Jehovah, but we don't know if that's, so we don't say it because we're not sure how it was pronounced. We believe it was only the high priest who knew how the name was supposed to be pronounced.
Yeah, but even though I just said it like a few minutes ago, I just realized, oh my God.
Yeah, it's fine, you know.
Sorry. So,
God or Lord will suffice.
Right. So when they mention God's name, or when they mention God or Jesus or whatnot, you see them, to me, they look like they have like pain on their face. Like they feel physical pain when they hear it. And it just makes me think of, of this talk I once heard, when I would go to Kingdom Hall with my mother. And it's like whenever demons hear God's name, they cower. And it makes me think: are these people? And I know I'm going to sound crazy to the leftists that listen to this show, and I know they do, just to like they laugh without having a point. Like, it makes me think that, are they possessed?
Listen, I wouldn't discount it as a possibility. I wouldn't put it past them.
And I mean, which is why, like, and even though I don't want to associate nationalism with religion, because how I grew up, you can't be you can't be religious, you can't be a follower.
Yeah, I respect that. I understand that, and it's funny you mention that, because I think this is another reason why they hate Israel. So, or Zionism. So, what is Zionism?
Yeah.
Zionism started in the late 19th century. It emerged in the context of nationalist movements in Europe. So, right, historians will frequently lump, the irredentists in Italy, like Meucci and Garibaldi. They'll lump them with von Bismarck and the German nationalists. They'll put Zionism in sort of that historical context, because, in Italy, Germany, Europe, they had this nationalist sentiment in the late 19th century. And in 1897, they had the Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland, and, that's really where that started. It started off as a completely, it started off with some religious support, right? There were some rabbis who supported it. There were plenty at the time who didn't, but, that's changed over the years. But it started off as a political movement with the belief that the Jewish people, persecuted and suffering for millennia in the diaspora, in the exile, that they should be able to return to their homeland in mass. There always were Jews there. That's the other thing. You have this meme going around with an American Indian going around Facebook today, on the other 98 and Occupy Wall Street and other far left groups, where they're making an equivalency between Zionism and, the way that American Indians were treated in this country. Totally historically false. It's a false equivalency, 100%, but, they're making it sound like that this was a colonialist movement when it wasn't, because there were Jews always there. There were waves of immigration of rabbis and Jews in the 1600s, the 1700s, even the 1300s, after the Crusades. There always was a rabbinical presence in Israel. In Sfat, or Safed, you had the Kabbalists, the mystics were there in the 1500s, writing books and everything. So there always was a Jewish presence there. For anybody to claim otherwise, they know nothing about Jewish history. There always was a Jewish presence there. There always were Jews living there, even after the destruction of the temple in the year 70 AD. But I think part of the reason why they really hate Zionism and why they really hate Israel is because it was formed on the basis of a nationalist movement. You know, well, we heard, you know, when Trump was running 2015, 2016, we heard this really negative talk about nationalism. Nationalism all of a sudden became a dirty word, despite the fact that it was nationalism that enabled, you know, many peoples to be free. This is the ideology that enabled people to have self-determination, you know, and if we talk about it in the current context of wanting our country to abandon globalism and world federalism and various schemes like that, it really drives them up the wall because, you know, the idea of a sovereign nation state is another thing that the left hates. You know, the idea that countries should be motivated by, you know, by their own economic self-interest, and that countries should not feel obligated to provide humanitarian intervention. The idea that a country should not be involved in entangling alliances. The idea that a country shouldn't be part of these free trade agreements, which were disastrous in many ways. You know, these are all things that they loathe. And I think that if you get beneath the surface and understand the way that these ideas bounce off each other, I think it becomes very easy to paint a picture and explain why there is this hatred of anything nationalistic, why there's a hatred of anything sovereign, a hatred of anything objective, a hatred of any moral truths that have withstood the test of time.
My question is, you know, my focus really is right now is the hatred of anything religious. Right. As a rabbi, I mean, you probably see it, and I've been seeing it because, you know, to be honest, I'm taking Bible studies again. And, you know, I'm actually writing a joke about it because there was this girl that I was talking to, and when I was honest about the fact that I'm testing out my spirituality, she was turned off by it. And she said she couldn't talk to me because she can't be with someone that is like that. And I'm like, there are a lot of men these days that are experimenting with their sexuality, with, you know, with dating
every kind of drug you could imagine.
Me, I'm experimenting with God, and that makes me a bad person.
Yeah,
it's like I'm trying to. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying, like, what do I think I'll take to it? I don't know. But it's like, it's a question that's inside of me that needs to get answered, or I'm just not going to, I don't think I'll grow as a human. And it just, and honestly, and I'm very open about that to a lot of people. Like, look, this is what my intentions are. I don't know, but it's a route that I need to explore. And it's like people look at you like you're weird. And the question I want to ask, do you feel that people act like that is because they're afraid to be held accountable by a higher power?
Yeah, you know, I think that they exhibit such a hatred towards religiously or spiritually inclined people because I do think that psychologically there really could be a very deep-seated guilt. I think that there could really be, you know, I think that they are afraid of judgment. I think maybe deep down they have some semblance of the fact, you know, that the day will come when they pass away. What's going to happen when they die? You know, and I think people don't want to face these things. They don't want to face their mortality. They don't want to face matters of eternity because it makes them uncomfortable. And that's the thing. Religion in a certain way is meant to make us uncomfortable because it challenges us to be better people. Right? It challenges us to work on ourselves, to repent of our ways, and to do better. You know, and you know, it's really ironic because most social movements in America actually were religiously inspired. That's the great irony.
Really?
If it wasn't for religion, wasn't for the church, there would have been no abolitionism in America. Right? You know, yeah, there were those who claimed the biblical basis for slavery, which is true. I mean, there is slavery in the Bible. There was slavery in the Talmud. Right? It's a very old institution, slavery, but, you know, the abolitionists were religiously motivated. So,
Yeah, but there was a way out of slavery. Well, I know as far as I can remember in the Bible that there was a way out of slavery.
Yes, that's the thing. Biblical slavery was, the way the Jews practiced slavery was very humane compared to other societies.
Right.
That we could say. Right, there was manumission for slaves, the Canaanite servant, there was a way that he would be freed and all of this. They were supposed to have rest on the Sabbath and all of that. But anyway, getting back to the point, many of the movements for social change in America had a religious basis. So, for them for this generation, for religion to be treated with this impunity, it's very, it makes no sense. It shows an ignorance of history, and, it really shows that people are very self-serving, that people don't want to yield to things that are bigger than themselves. They don't want to acknowledge that there are forces bigger than themselves at play in the universe and at play in the providential history of things.
Right.
So I think a very big part of it is the egotism. I think a very big part of it is the self-absorption. That's very present in society nowadays, right? The generation of the selfie. It's, for many people in society, the Holy Trinity is me, myself, and I. And I think this is a very big component of that. But, it also comes down to intolerance. And I face it myself in the dating world. It's what I do for a living is it's very unpopular in the dating realm. Most people don't want to be involved with somebody who's a chaplain and involved in rabbinics and things like that. It's very off-putting to a lot of people. Could it be that they think they're being judged? Maybe, but I really don't think so. I think it's really more that there's just they revile people of faith so much that they don't want to be involved in a dating context with us,
right?
Either.
Goodness, I had a question and I forgot.
I'll come back to you.
Yeah. Thinking. But do you well, side note, does Judaism believe in hell?
Yes. Probably not in the same way as Christians do, but yes.
Well,
in traditional Orthodox Jewish belief, there is a belief that there will be punishment for those, that there will be punishment for those who are worthy of such punishment in the afterlife. I mean, the belief is that ultimately, at some point, perhaps most people will find their way back to God, in the afterlife, through those sufferings. But yeah, long story short, contrary to what people think, it's a very big misconception that Jews don't believe in an afterlife. Jews most certainly do believe in an afterlife.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do is I'm involved in Jewish burials. And in Orthodox Judaism, when a body is prepared for burial, there are certain prayers that are said. And there's constant, sort of intercessions that the person would be spared from the fires of Gehenna, from the fires of hell, for various things that they've done in this world. So, yes, Jews certainly do believe in that. And, if you believe God is just, and fair, then there certainly has to be punishment for those who are deserving of it.
Right.
Just as there's reward for those who are worthy of reward.
Yeah, because, I mean, how I grew up, I was taught that there is no such thing as hell. There's no afterlife. There's no immortal soul. Because in the Bible it says, once you die, your thoughts cease. And what God said to Adam after him and Eve sinned, from dust you are, from dust you will return. Which means once you die, you're dead. You're done. There's no consciousness.
Do the Jehovah's Witnesses believe that there will be a resurrection of the dead at the end of days?
Yeah, during the 1,000-year tribulation after Armageddon, so that way the people that didn't get a chance to learn about God would have a chance, that 1,000 years to have a chance to learn about him, and come to become followers of him. And then Satan will be released to try to tempt them. But after that, he'll be destroyed. But the people that stay faithful, most of the people will remain on Earth, living forever on a paradise Earth. The chosen 144,000, which are originally were from the 12 tribes of Israel, which became open to the other nations, will rule as priestly kings. Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, no question. Have you seen bias against Jehovah's Witnesses from the left specifically? I know that in America, like during the Second World War, there was discrimination against Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh yeah, they were
because they were conscientious objectors.
Yeah.
But but nowadays, have you seen much discrimination from the left against Jehovah's Witnesses as they exhibit the same discrimination towards other Christian groups?
Well, I mean, only from what my mom has told me when she goes door to door. The slamming of the door, people calling the cops because they're in the buildings. Stuff like that. People saying, "I worship Satan." The people are dumb like that. They'll say stupid nonsense like that. And that was redundant, stupid nonsense. I could have just said stupid thing.
Right. One thing that I find very fascinating is, the same leftists that don't have religious belief, really, when it comes to describing Trump and when it comes to describing conservatives, like Rosie O'Donnell and other people, suddenly they get talking about the devil, suddenly they talk about Satan, evil, wickedness. They bring in all these words, that is heathen, as non-believers, they would never otherwise use. But when it comes to attacking conservatives, this kind of rhetoric and talk comes out. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, and they constantly, they and thank you for bringing this up. You make a good point. They constantly disparage the religious right, like it's wrong to have a moral compass these days. And again, how I was taught, it was foretold that what was good will become bad, and what was bad will become good.
Yeah.
I mean, you see things that, I was, I told my instructor, there are certain things that I tolerate, but I don't like. And, and the only reason why I tolerate them is because I'm a libertarian, and I believe, of course, other biblical training I've had, everyone is responsible for their own salvation.
That's right, yeah. We're given free will, and we're responsible for how we live our lives.
Exactly. And it's not, and God also said, your judgment, only I'm allowed to judge. Which means if he really has a problem with certain behaviors, he doesn't need me to be walking around, beating up people for doing something that I feel is wrong.
It's interesting. That's an interesting point, judging other people,
Right.
I think people often understand that this means that, we're not allowed to exhibit any judgment towards what people are doing. On the other hand, we are supposed to be able to discern what is right and what is wrong in what people are doing. Listen, we make elections, we vote in elections. We make judgments. We make judgments all the time. We judge situations. We judge people to be favorable or unfavorable all the time. So that's always something I found very interesting. Liberals love to take this out of context, by the way. Don't judge me. They love taking it out of the original biblical context.
Right.
As if it's saying, that you're not allowed to express displeasure somehow with certain lifestyles or certain behaviors, when really it seems more that when it's saying don't judge, it's really saying, don't put yourself in the position of God. determine who, who's going where, I guess.
Right.
I think it's a fine point that needs to be elucidated somehow. But
well, yeah, I mean, and also they judge people on. I mean, from what I've seen, from liberals and leftists, they project a lot of their own, I guess, psychosis onto others, and they judge others by their own ideas of what that person believes. And and it's like whenever I've had debates with them, especially people that think that they know what Jehovah's Witnesses believe, and it's like, oh, you guys, what's the one thing? Oh, you guys wait, or the silly one is, oh, you guys wake up at 5 a.m. to knock on my door, and it's like, no, we do not wake up at 5 a.m. We probably wake up at 7 to be out the door by 8 to get to get to the meeting for to go out door to door by 9 o'clock. But other than that, oh god, what was the other point I was trying to make? But they believe that, and they push that. Even though it's not true, they believe the misconceptions out of their own head, aside more than the actual reality of the situation.
Right.
Like But are there any like leftist Jewish people that hinder you?
Oh yes, most definitely. It's a huge problem, and Jewish leftism, I really call it Jewish self-hatred, because it really is self-hatred, because the Jewish leftism, there's nothing Jewish about it, first of all. There are many people and many groups and organizations that claim to be Jewish, but their theology and their beliefs do not reflect traditional Jewish thinking.
Yeah.
We're a small group, but we're very much fragmented amongst different denominational lines.
Yeah.
And the largest Jewish group in America are the Reform Jews. The Reform Jews do not really keep Jewish law. They don't believe that Jewish law is binding. They don't believe that the Torah is authoritative. They don't believe that God commanded laws that need to be followed. They believe that most of the laws that God gave in the Torah are optional. They're suggestions and not binding. The Orthodox still believe that the Torah is binding and that the Jewish legal process is binding, which is why I think most Orthodox Jews tend to be Republican voting. And most Reform Jews tend to be Democrat voters, because, for them, traditional Jewish thinking has really been replaced. It's been replaced by a sense of wanting to repair the world. It's been replaced by a sense of leftism. It's a pathology. It's a self-hatred. That they're afraid to stand up for any Jewish interests. They're very lukewarm on Israel. I mean, what we saw the day that they opened the embassy, you had Palestinians from Gaza that were storming the border to try to get into Israel. Hamas admitted that of 62 that were killed, 50 were Hamas members. Right? So you had protesters that were violent. They had rocks and machetes and everything else in hand. They were looking to break the ramparts to come into Israel and to launch attacks in retaliation for the embassy opening. And the Reform movement released a statement, expressing sympathy and condolences at the death of these terrorists, basically. So they have a reluctance to really stand up for Jewish self-interest.
Yeah.
They endorse politicians that seek to raise taxes upon middle-class and upper-middle-class earners. Most American Jews fall into the middle class and more so in the upper middle class. So even on an economic level, they go against self. Most of them oppose school choice. Right? Religious Jews who, don't necessarily make too much money to send their kids to parochial schools on top of the tax burden. It becomes a very big expense. And, these leftist Jews, because they support unions and the teachers union, the UFT and what else, they oppose school choice. They're against charter schools, and they're also against any kind of vouchers or any kind of tax break to parents that have to pay parochial school tuition. So, these are people that I would say are Jewish due to their ancestry, but their lifestyle and their way of thinking is anything but Jewish. The other thing is that the architects of the left basically were anti-Jewish. They were anti-Semitic. Karl Marx was a big anti-Semite.
Yeah. It's kind of
Saint-Simon, who was one of the French socialist thinkers, hated Jews. Big hatred of Jews amongst all of these socialist, theoreticians.
Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned that, because there's this, I don't know if you've heard of, there's Antifa, he's high up in Antifa, especially in New York. His name is Spencer Sunshine. And he describes himself as a Jewish socialist. I forgot the word that he used. The name of of that group, but it comes out as Jewish socialism, or Jewish socialist.
Yes, so I'll tell you, the Jewish socialists of the last generation, you had a lot of them 100 years ago. They almost died out for the most part, but apparently some of them are still around. The Bund, the Jewish socialist Bund that they had in America.
Bundists,
they were viciously, the Bundists. They were very anti-Zionist, very against Israel. But also, these were the kinds of people that on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the holiest day of the year, they would have masquerade balls. So, for these people, Jewishness is an ethnicity. There's no religious attachment to being Jewish, right? And the thing is, people often ask, well, is Jewish a nationality? Is it a religion? At the end of the day, a person of any nationality can convert and become a Jew if they accept the religion and its lifestyle and its laws. Okay? And the word Jew, it really comes from the word Yisrael, which means one who wrestles with God, one who engages with the divine, right? That was the story when Jacob wrestles with the angel in the book of Genesis.
Yes, and the angel put his hand on his knee and
on the thigh, the sciatic nerve, the thigh, and all that, and that, being Jewish, if you take the core of it out, you're left with pastrami sandwiches and lox and bagels, all of which are very tasty, but it doesn't make a person Jewish to engage in some vestiges of a cultural identity that goes back a few centuries.
I do like the arugula.
Centuries.
I love the arugula.
Yeah, these things are tasty, but and they're wonderful, they're nice, but it doesn't make a person Jewish.
Yeah. Just imagine holding on to one of God's angels, and he's like, "I'm not letting go until you give me my blessing."
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that story.
Yeah. So, right, these are the stories in the Torah, in the Bible, that that really shaped the nation, right? The nation of Israel, it started with Abraham, and it was really solidified when God revealed the Torah on Mount Sinai, which we celebrate in a couple of days, right? Pentecost, Shavuot. But for somebody like Spencer Sunshine to call himself Jewish, it's a misnomer.
Yeah.
He's really a socialist who happens to have Jewish ancestors. And for somebody like him, the Jewishness is as significant as if they were an Italian or a German or a Japanese person who's a socialist. It's, he's a socialist. His way of thinking, his lifestyle is socialist. The Jewish part is an afterthought. It's, it's a pure matter of ancestry and blood and nothing more. Jewish in name only.
Yeah. If we could do a little side note, quick question: what are your thoughts on the Black Israelites, the ones that claim that people from the Caribbean, like Puerto Rican, Dominicans, Haitians, Cubans, Mexicans and whatnot, are the real Jews?
It's ridiculous, because after the destruction, we don't know what happened to these tribes. The 10 lost tribes, we don't know what happened to them. There's speculation that some went to Yemen, some went to Ethiopia, some went to India. But again, that's speculation. We have no way of proving this. Mm-hmm. Nobody could prove what tribe they came from. No Jewish person could tell you what tribe their ancestors come from. It's totally lost. Totally lost. So it's irrelevant. What tribal affiliation at this point in Jewish history, it's irrelevant, and it's been irrelevant for thousands of years.
Right.
In most cases, they constitute hate groups. Mm-hmm. They preach such a hatred of Jews and such a hatred of Christians and white people and every other thing that I would agree with the leftist organizations like the ADL that they do constitute a hate group.
Right.
And I think that the FBI should investigate them. I think they could be very dangerous. We don't know what they're capable of. And you have a corollary of this amongst neo-Nazis. You have some neo-Nazis who think that Scandinavians and, Welsh and English and Scots are, they think that Aryan peoples are the lost tribes also. To me, these black Israelites are no different. I think that they're black Nazis, to tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're haters. I think they shouldn't be taken. I don't think anybody should consider anything they say because they're a dangerous hate group.
Do you think that they're ridiculous?
Now, there is a difference, though.
Right.
There are some Caribbean peoples. There are people in the Caribbean that could have Jewish ancestry because after the Spanish Inquisition, right, what became of the Jews of the Inquisition? Or their descendants who had to convert? The Marranos, what happened to them? Many of them did that. Many of them, or their descendants, did emigrate to the Caribbean, or they did emigrate to Mexico or different places. So there could be people in Latin America and the Caribbean, possibly even in West Africa, there could be people that have Jewish ancestors. And we see actually that there are people among them who are returning to Jewish observance. They believe they have an ancestral connection. And, they do convert formally because we don't know what happened to the genealogy, but really they're reverting, they're returning, they're coming home, they feel, to Jewish life. That's a totally different story, and in most cases, these groups are joining the mainstream of, Jewish life. There are groups all over West Africa and Latin America that are doing these conversions, and, they're as Jewish as me or as Jewish as anyone else. And, they need to be respected and loved and honored as such. But, that's a different case. It's two different ball games.
And let's look at the other group, Christian Identity, that they pretty much believe the same thing.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. They think that the Aryans are the lost tribes. That's what they call Christian Identity. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've come across them, especially online, and they are extreme. Like, if you want to talk about white supremacists, I mean, they'll outright call. Like, they'll call me, who's this mongrel? They'll call me a mongrel. Yeah. They'll say, of course they'll call me a spick and whatnot. And it's like, wow. So you just, it's like they hate Jews, but they want to be Jews.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to me. It's if you hate them so much, like, do you? But is it because you hate them for their ideology, or you hate them because you're jealous of whatever you feel that they have that you don't?
Yeah, I think that most of the anti-Semitism has an economic basis.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the reason why the left is anti-Semitic is because maybe they associate Jew with capitalist. It's funny, the Jews have gotten accused of being capitalists and communists all at the same time. It's the absurdity of anti-Semitism. That Jews have been accused, of pulling both sides of the coin, pulling both sides of the string with almost every conflict, with every problem in modern history. Really it's the extreme far right and the left, the far left.
Mm-hmm.
I think really are two sides of the same coin in many cases. Yeah. And I think that the anti-Semitism is one thing that really unites both groups and both elements.
Yeah, because I mean the way I've heard Zionism explained as something akin to the Illuminati and Freemasonry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, is it like that? Is there a globalist, perhaps a globalist faction that call themselves Zionists, but they're not really Zionists? Like, are there fake?
Yeah, you know something? I'll tell you what the irony of that is. The United Nations is the epitome of globalism. The Council on Foreign Relations is the epitome of globalism. And NATO is the epitome of globalism, and all three of these organizations are quite anti-Zionist and quite anti-Israel. Yeah, you know, the United Nations Human Rights Council especially is dominated by all kinds of third world countries that have nothing to do with human rights. You know, the UN Human Rights Council is populated by some of the worst offenders against human rights in the world, and you know, they passed a resolution in the United Nations in the 70s calling Zionism racism. You know, with, you know, America probably being the only country to disagree with that. So, you know, it's just funny how they play both sides of the same coin, that Jews are accused of being globalist, yet the globalist entities on the face of the earth are against Israel. You know, it doesn't make any sense.
Okay. So, I mean, so in closing, because we got 8 more minutes to go, when it, so, do you feel that there is a holy war, like a spiritual holy war, information holy war going on? Like, is there, do you sense that there is a spiritual awakening, like, with people seeking more spiritual to fulfill their spiritual needs?
I wish there were. I think that there are the select few who are interested in having this awakening, but when I look at society as a whole, sadly I'm not optimistic. I'm really not optimistic when I look at the influence of the left and when I see the corruption of the culture and the decline in morals and values in society. It's very disheartening. I do think there is a, you know, you can call it a spiritual war or a holy war. I think that things are degenerating to such a point in this country where, you know, where the faithful will have to take up, you know, I'm not going to say take up arms because it sounds like I'm then calling for violence, but they're going to have to start defending themselves.
Right.
You know, there's, you know, I think under the Obama administration, they did a lot of things legally that attacked religious liberty. I think, you know, a lot of people don't talk about the accomplishments of the Trump administration. They don't talk about the executive orders that were signed and all of this. But many of the Obama administration's attacks against religious liberty have been undone, you know, through Trump's executive orders and other actions. You know, but at the same time, the fact that, you know, we're able to have a situation where street preachers are frequently arrested under various ordinances or misapplications of ordinances, it's very bad.
Right.
You know, and I'll tell you, we're talking about the street preachers before.
Right.
You know, I obviously don't agree with their theology necessarily, but I appreciate them for one reason. These guys have the balls to go out on the streets and to call out people that are immoral. They have the balls to go out there and to call out, you know, various categories of sinners. Right. You know, and they have the audacity to call these people out, and, you know, they're trying to set people straight by going on the front lines. And while I don't agree with their religious beliefs necessarily, I do agree with the fact that they're trying to make people aware of God and they're trying to make people aware of the morality. Right. And as long as these guys, like Reuben Israel and whoever else, as long as they're under attack legally, you know, from the police, and as long as leftists are able to yell at them and assault them and disturb them, you know, for as long as that happens, we're going to have a very big problem in this country. Yeah. And, you know, I hope that they have adequate legal representation. You know, for the sake of the country, I hope that these people have adequate legal representation, because, listen, the Constitution is freedom of speech. There's no right to not be offended.
Right. I mean, like, look, I've have, like, trolled, like, Pentecostal, you know, Pentecostal street preachers. I'm, you know, being honest. But my problem wasn't with their message. It was the fact that he had a microphone and the volume was all the way up and he's yelling. And
that could be an issue, I guess.
Like I can't. No one can understand what you're saying. You're screaming.
Yeah.
Like you have a microphone. There is no reason to scream at the top of your lungs. And I will understand you have a microphone, you have a megaphone, and you're talking normally because you want to project your voice. Because even when growing up, I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses don't stand on the corner and just start screaming randomly. They'll go up to people, and have personal conversations like, are you interested in learning about the Bible? Blah 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 blah. This is the magazines we have for this month that we're offering for free, of course. Would you like a free at-home Bible study? It's very calm, very, very personal.
Yeah, it's different styles, and the street preachers they say explicitly that their style is confrontational.
Right.
And listen, for some people that might work and might be effective.
Right.
It might be effective for some people. Other people might get put off by it, but at the end of the day, listen, if they were preaching the virtues of Pastafarianism, if they're doing it in a way that's legal, there should be a right of freedom of expression.
Exactly.
It's,
do you
I don't have to agree with what they're saying, but I'll defend their right to express it.
How far down you think this country has gone down, and what are the major problems that are spiritually bringing down this country?
Oh boy, I'm going to try to curtail my comments on that, but we've gone downhill a long way since the '60s. I think the sexual revolution of the '60s, and really, I think a major problem is that sex has become very cheap. It's become cheap and easy. The hookup culture, I think, is a major problem. Major problem in the hookup culture. I'm not necessarily expressing the idea that abstinence until marriage should be practiced by people, but, listen, to sleep with anybody, you could pick up at a bar or whatever, it's a moral and psychological crisis. And I think that has led to a lot of mental illness, especially among women. Yeah, really among women, it's led to a lot of mental illness. Contraception and the ease of accessibility to the pill, I think, has resulted in the same as well. I think that there's a correlation between the pill and various forms of mental illness. And the irony is that what was supposed to be liberating to women has really come to oppress women.
What about
the hookup culture? The hookup culture is very bad for women, and women put themselves in this position, unfortunately. So I think that's a very big problem, and I think it's a huge contributing factor to the decline in morals that we really see, more so than anything else.
And do you think that contributes to other problems like the economy,
yeah, definitely.
I mean, okay, but as far like you mentioned contraception, what if contraception was used in the context of marriage? Like, let's say a couple, we're not ready to have children yet, but we're married.
I think that's a different story, because there you have stable family units. So I'll tell you something, like gay marriage, why is nobody challenging the legality of gay marriage? Right, even the most religiously conservative people have given up on that battle. Why? Okay, I can't sanction a gay marriage because it's against my religious beliefs, but I'm not going to actively oppose it, because it's a matter of settled law, and it creates stability. It gives people stable family units and stable family structures. Okay, whether I think that this reflects God's will or not is a different matter entirely. I'm not going to go into that.
I actually read an article that it doesn't. I mean, you still have these these gay marriages. You have these guys they're still sleeping around.
Yeah, well, then
so
I think, people sleeping around in any marriage, and that's no good. That defeats the whole purpose of marriage. Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
So then I guess it's not a blessing, you know, at all. But, you know, I think, you know, but behaviors like that are really what are bringing down the country. The fact that sexuality is treated, you know, as something no strings attached, it's a very big problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, outside of the context of a committed relationship, I think it has very, very disastrous effects. Psychologically, economically, even medically, okay? We have antibiotic-resistant gonorrhea nowadays. All right? That should scare the hell out of people.
Yep.
You know, and hedonism, you know, again, this goes back to hedonism, right? You know, love of the genitals above all else, love of the self above all else, love of gratification. You know, the desire for instant gratification is a major moral problem. You know, decadence, you know, all of these things go together. You know, all of these things go together. I'm not going to target gay people for, you know, accusing them of bringing down the morals of the country.
Right.
But the idea that sexually anything should go, there shouldn't be boundaries, is a major problem as well. We've lost all sense of boundaries. We've lost all sense of propriety. And we've lost all sense of shame, right? People talk about shame as if it's a bad thing nowadays. You know, you're slut-shaming me. You're body-shaming me, right? You talk about shame as if it's a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
A little shame, a little humility, I think, would go a very long way in helping us go forward as a country. A little shame is a very good thing, not a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, that's all I got, Rabbi. Do you have anything you want to close with?
Yeah, you know, I think a lot of things came to the forefront tonight. It could have sounded like I was all over the place, but, you know, unfortunately, these are very complex problems we're facing.
Right.
And, you know, I think at the end of the day, in, you know, this postmodern society we're living in, you know, I think really what there is really more of a need for is, and what we're lacking is, you know, really the ability to just let people engage in what they need to do, right? To let people be on the path that they're on. You know, I'm not saying you have to agree with it, but to accuse people involved in religious matters of being haters, this is very bad, and it's not going. And you know, this is the reason why the Democrats will continue to lose elections. Right. You know, it's not doing the left any good. You know, and
like I know it annoys me when people are like, oh, you do this, that means you're homophobic. I'm tired of these homophobic rules. I was like, look, we're not going protesting your funerals. We're not going out beating you up. It's just like, look, it's in the Bible. It's perhaps in the Talmud. You know,
sure.
It's being gay or sex outside of marriage is a sin. It is. It's
right. The sin is really in the Jewish understanding. It is sinful for people of the same sex to do sexual things together.
Right.
You know, we consider it to be a very, very egregious sin. And, you know, we're not out condemning people. We're not out protesting at funerals or causing, you know, violent harm to people, as you said. You know, the problem is that having a theological conviction is treated with more severity than those in the Muslim world that are actually causing physical harm to these people. And that's the problem. You know? And it's an ultimate form of virtue signaling. And if I had to really summarize everything that's wrong with the left, it's virtue signaling. That's the modus operandi. It's virtue signaling.
Yeah.
And double standards and hypocrisy. And
actually, now, you know, it's funny that you bring that up because it's a point that it kept escaping my head. You're right. It is virtue signaling because I really like what the left doesn't have is conviction. They don't have passion in their beliefs. It seems like they just parrot these things that they heard all like third party, and they want to like be like the Pharisees. And I bring this up because in the Bible, the Pharisees were the ones that were very boastful about their beliefs. and that's
the left. Yeah, they want to meddle. The left, they want to meddle for being woke. They want to be woke AF. I'm not going to say it, but they want everybody. They want to be woke. And that's It's a show and it's a display, and they're woke until people disagree with them. They cannot tolerate any disagreement
because they have no argument.
And that's the most illiberal thing ever, to not be able to tolerate difference and disagreement and opinion.
Yeah, because they can't tolerate disagreement because they have no real argument. They can't back up their beliefs. So when you come out with facts, they get upset because they have no argument. So they revert to, you're stupid, you're this, you're that, and ironically, if they
ad hominem attacks.
Ironically, if they call you homophobic, they'll use homophobic language to try to shame you.
Right.
It's like
exactly.
You just called me a faggot for talking about how homosexuality is a sin. How do you feel?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Donald Trump gets rid of the Iran deal. He moves the embassy to Jerusalem. Nazi. Right, the most pro-Israel president in the history of America, Nazi. Okay, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, female press secretary. Misogynist. They body shame her. They say everything disgusting and vile and misogynistic against this woman. It's not to be believed.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's lazy. And I'm pretty sure the liberals that will listen to this show, they won't have a real argument, yet they'll be like
no substance. Yeah, no substance at all.
They'll give this podcast laugh reacts or LOL without any explanation on what they find funny or what they disagree.
Because when all else fails, when you cannot present a cogent or a reasoned argument, you resort to ad hominem attacks. And what are the ad hominem attacks of today? It's hate speech, it's homophobic, misogynistic, Islamophobic, racist, etc., etc.
Yeah.
That's the default position, it seems.
Yeah, I've been accused of being a Nazi, and I'm like, as a Jewish person, using the word Nazi for every little thing. Do you find that offensive?
Right. Oh, it makes my blood boil when people say that ICE enforcing immigration laws is Nazis. All right, arresting people in violation of our laws is not the same as genociding them on the basis of their religion.
Mm-hmm. Well,
it's disgusting. And in closing, just one thing that came to mind.
Mm-hmm.
They also like throwing out this term fascist. All right, look at the fascist platform, the fascist planks of the Italian fascists, 1919. All right, almost every left-wing cause nowadays is one of the things that they fought for, including minimum wage, nationalization of industry, taxation of churches. All fascist, policy positions from 1919 in Italy.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, especially when they chant Israel go to hell at their rallies, I really don't think they should be screaming about who's a Nazi and who's not. It makes absolutely no type of sense to me. So,
yeah.
But anyways, Rabbi, thank you for coming on. Thank you for the.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It was my pleasure.
Yes, thank you for it. It was very educational. And yeah, man. Thank you for being the spiritual advisor for today's show.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a wonderful night. I'll be back anytime.
Thank you very much, and you're welcome to come back anytime you want. Anyways,
thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Cool. Thank you. That was Rabbi Daniel. Thank you. Please, like to thank everyone for listening to today's show. And look, it's don't knock people who are pursuing. There are people that either I try not to knock people that want to pursue things that I don't agree with. I'm not going to waste my time and saying, oh, you're gonna die in Armageddon or stuff like that. That's not my place. My faith is my faith. I'm pursuing something because I have a certain calling in my spirit that, hey, maybe you should be focusing more on God's things. Why? Maybe it could be because of the way I was raised, or because of the way I grew up. Hey, you might have certain beliefs because of the way you're raised, by the way you grew up. But if you don't like what someone says, or you don't like what someone preaches or believes, just walk away. But there's really no reason to be going and screaming in someone's face. If you're like, it just really seems like a mental illness on the left's part, just screaming, oh, you're this, you're that, you're a racist because you're talking about Jesus, or you're talking about God, and how, because at the end of the day, you have these preachers, they mean well. I would like to believe that they mean well, that they really want the best for people around them. So, but other than that, I'd like to thank everyone for listening to today's show. Come back next week, same crotch shot time, same crotch shot schedule. And as always, from my house to your house, mahalo.
That's the end of my show. Donk.